And with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, part of the reason for the record high campaign spending in this year's midterm elections is the Supreme Court's ruling in January in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. The court's decision cleared the way for corporations, unions, and other interest groups to spend unlimited amounts of money to elect and defeat candidates. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled corporations have First Amendment rights and that the government cannot impose restrictions on their political speech. The ruling has come under heavy criticism, including from President Obama, who openly criticized the court's decision in his State of the Union address.
Earlier this month, a group of more than 50 law professors and prominent attorneys, including 7 former state attorneys general, issued a letter calling on Congress to consider a constitutional amendment to overturn the decision. The letter says the Citizens United ruling, quote, was not only wrongly decided, but presents a serious danger to effective self-government of, for, and by the American people, a danger which must be addressed. The letter was drafted and circulated by Free Speech for People, a coalition of public interest groups formed after the Citizens United ruling. John Boniface is the co-founder and director of Free Speech for People and the legal director of Voter Action. He's joining us from Chicopee, Massachusetts. And here in New York, we're joined by Jeff Clements, former Assistant Attorney General of Massachusetts. He's the General Counsel of Free Speech for People. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Jeff, let's begin with you. Lay this out. What it is that you are calling for.
Sure, Amy, and thanks for having me here. Glad to talk about that, Juan. Free Speech for People is a nationwide organization calling for and working for a constitutional amendment. And the Constitution provides for that process under Article 5 of the Constitution. It's been used 27 times before. It's how women got the right to vote. It's how African Americans got the right to vote. It's how we got due process applied to the states. It's how we made our democracy in many ways, is through the amendment process. And now we're called upon to do it again. With what the Supreme Court did in Citizens United is essentially tell the American people that, look, you know that corporate power is a problem. You know that corporate money is dominating our elections, our judiciaries, our legislatures, but there's nothing you can do about it. If that's true, as Bill Moyers and Bob Edgar and others have said on this show and elsewhere, we have a very serious problem with democracy in this country, and a real question about whether we as a democracy and a republic will survive as a government of the people rather than as a plutocracy. So Free Speech for People is committed to overturning Citizens United and reversing that decision and having the American people of all different political persuasions come together to say to the court, actually, yes, we can regulate corporate power in our elections and elsewhere. Yes, we can do that, and the way we do that is through a constitutional amendment.
This whole issue of corporations being people, obviously when it comes to criminal indictments, you rarely see a corporation criminally indicted when it violates the law. It's always a civil complaint that ends up with the corporation paying a fine. Yet it's being considered a person from the point of view of free speech rights, but rarely is a corporation considered a person from the point of view of committing crimes. What's the resonance in terms of the general population over this decision, from what you've been able to tell?
Oh, it's absolutely clear that Americans across all political persuasions know that corporations aren't people, that corporate money isn't speech. If you look at the polling, and polling's been done several times, not only do 3/4 of the American people, 75%, disagree with Citizens United, and that includes Republicans, Independents, Democrats, but again, 3/4 fear that Congress won't do enough to fix the problem, and would support a constitutional amendment to fix the problem. So it's very clear that the common sense notion that corporations don't speak, that the people's freedom of speech and the people's not only opportunity but duty to govern in this country does not apply in the same way to corporate entities.
John Boniface, with us from Chicopee. People for the American Way just came out with a report on pro-corporate players in American politics, documenting the unprecedented sums of corporate money that are being injected into this campaign. Can you talk about some of the so-called citizens groups, like Rose groups? Can you talk about the Koch brothers, how they're funneling money in, and this whole issue of secrecy?
Yes, and Citizens United certainly opened the floodgates to corporate money coming in to the process in this cycle and beyond. But that report demonstrates that there are now these shadowy groups that have formed to receive this money in a secret way and to spend it in the hundreds of millions of dollars in our elections. American Crossroads is one of them, started by Karl Rove, spending upwards of $65+ million in this cycle alone. Another organization, American Action Network, started by former Senator Norm Coleman, who lost to Senator Al Franken in Minnesota, again using corporate dollars and other dollars, upwards of $25+ million, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce leading the way with more than $75 million expected through the chamber coming in the form of attack ads around the country, funded by corporate sources. The danger here, Amy and Juan, is that not only is there a threat to the integrity of our elections when we have corporate general treasury funds being spent by these artificial entities that are not people, but the danger is that this is really a corporate takeover of our democracy and our Constitution. Citizens United was not just a campaign finance case. It was a corporate rights case. In fact, it was an extreme extension of a corporate rights doctrine that has eroded the First Amendment for 30 years. And we need to return to the basic purpose of the First Amendment, free speech, and the Constitution, which is for people, not for corporations. And that's why we need a constitutional amendment, a 28th Amendment, to restore the Constitution and the democracy to the people.
John, I want to turn to a clip from the documentary The Best Government Money Can Buy. This is Bruce Jostin, Executive Vice President of Government Affairs at the U.S.